All right, so now that we've looked at constructors within a class and creating an instance of an object or instantiating an object like we did here in a separate class, let's start looking at methods, because a method can be anything. I mean, I guess a method can do anything. And so let's start thinking about a method that lets us retrieve the years of service, okay? Or suppose that we want to figure out how much each employee is going to be paid. And let's say that an employee goes up 2%. Their pay increases 2% every year. Now, this is just me talking out loud. We can change that later on. But let's say that we want to be able to get the salary of an employee, how much they earn in a year, right? Well, you can make a method that lets you do that. You could also make a method that lets you figure out how many years the employee has been paid, and so on and so forth. Now, there's other methods called accessor and mutator methods. They're still methods, and their sole purpose is to access instance variables, or to modify or mutate or change the value of instance variables. And so methods are basically portions of code within a class. So a constructor itself is not a method. It's basically used when you make a new employee and never used again. And so the constructor here, this zero argument constructor, and the multiple argument constructor, they're both constructors. They're not used They're not used at the same time. You either use one or the other, and they only are used when you make the employee object. And so when you make Alex, who is an employee, you use the multiple argument constructor that it requires 5 arguments. When you make Brittany, who is also an employee, you also use the multiple argument constructor, which is this one. That means that you do not use the zero argument constructor. So although you've coded it, it is not used. So none of this code is ran. And you never use it again. After you make the employee, you don't use this code anymore. Its purpose is to initialize, to give an initial value to the instance variables, and then that's it. It's done. And so we can code methods, and not necessarily, but at least in my practice, I usually have my constructors at the beginning of the class, after the instance variables, and I have the toString method, which we also discussed, at the very end of the class. And so I'm going to put any methods in between right here. Now, methods, you can think of a method as a portion of code that does something that you want it to do. So again, it's all up to you. You're the one coding the employee class. And so we start thinking, well, let's see if we can make a method that does this or that. And this first method here that I'm going to use requires our understanding of substrings. So substring. I'm just thinking to myself right now how this is going to work out. Because I'm thinking of getting the hire date. But I think I might want to take a different approach, because I guess if I'm sharing this with you, if somebody's watching this video who has not looked at substrings, I don't want to confuse that person. And so let's do instead a method that gets the salary of an employee. So we'll just call it public. We don't know if we're going to return something yet, so I'll just put void and then salary. There we go, like that. Now let me explain what we're going to do. We're going to retrieve the salary of an employee. And so that we don't complicate ourselves too much here, we're going to need a parameter. And the parameter is something like years of service. So I'll call this an integer, years of service. That means how many years has the employee been employed. So 10 years, 5 years, so on and so forth. And I'm going to put it as a parameter right here. Again, just trying to keep this as simple as I can. And what we can do is we can make an array. And so at this point, we've discussed arrays. And I can make it in here, or I can make it as an instance variable. We can talk about which one's best later on. And so we can make an array called an array with integers in it. And we can call it something like salary schedule, which is typical of jobs that, well, not all jobs, I guess. At least in my experience, I've had jobs where there is no salary schedule, and I have jobs that there is a salary schedule. And let me talk about how this salary schedule works. So the first integer, the first element here, would be how much you get paid after having one complete year of service. And so let's say, for example, and to keep the math simple, let's just talk about straight dollars instead of percentage of your income. So let's say after 1 year of service, you'll get a $2,000 raise. And then when you have worked at Target for 2 years, or on your 2-year anniversary, maybe you'll, instead of just $2,200, maybe you get a $2,100 raise. And yes, this is an annual raise. And then maybe after 3 years of service, you get $2,200 of raise in addition. Okay, these are, you're accumulating. And then we can go at least maybe 4 years. Okay, and this is again just an example. We could expand on this, and it's okay for us to hard code this right now rather than try to make an equation. And so after you complete 1 year of service, you get $2,000 on top of what your current salary is, and then you get $2,100 and $2,200 and so on and so forth, right? Now we do need to know the person's initial salary, and so we could, if we want, add another parameter here, int. We can call it initial salary. So how much, because not everybody earns the same when they start a job. It depends on your function, what you're doing as an employee. And so let's say that we need to send, so for this to work, I need to send this method the initial salary, how much I was earning when I first got hired, and then how many years I've been working. So it's a simple method, but again, understand that this method serves a purpose. It's gonna give us the current salary of the employee. And if you want, you could call this, instead of just salary, you could call it current salary. It doesn't matter. And so what we can do is we can say, well, I know that if I have 1 year of service, I want to my initial salary, I want to add 2,000. If my years of service is 2, I want to add to my initial salary 2,000 for my first year, plus 2,100 for my second year. And then so on and so forth, right? So we have something in mind now. We have a method that is supposed to calculate the salary of an employee. Now, whether we want to return the salary, that's up to us, so that other people have access to it, or whether we just want to print it here, again, that's up to us. but we have a method. Now we need to implement the method, but we have a method in mind, right? So this is a method, and let's just make a comment here on to what the purpose of this method is. This method, salary, retrieves the employee's salary, and I should say this employee, salary based on initial salary and years of service. Okay, and so you have this method. It's right now just these lines of code, 2 lines of code, right? The heading of the method and then just one array here. But you have a method that coding this doesn't mean that you're gonna execute the coding these method, the salary method, doesn't mean that it's going to be executed. This might never be executed. It's possible that you never execute this code. But you code it so that if somebody wants to retrieve the salary of an employee, all they have to do is just send the initial salary for that employee, the years of service, and it should give them back, if you want it to, the current salary. I'm going to code it, but I want to talk a little bit about methods in general. And so let me talk about a different kind of method called a getter, or its formal name, an accessor method. Also called a getter method. And its purpose is to retrieve, get, so returns, I should say, because that's what we mean by get, returns the value of an instance variable. We talked about in the first video the fact that these variables are declared as private. So if somebody wants to retrieve only the name of an employee, you would have to write a method, an accessor method. Notice that it's still public because we want to access this method. We want to execute this method from outside of this class. The format is the same. Public, I'm going to write void for now. And then you give the method name, and I'm going to call this method called get name. I don't need to send any parameters here. And so it would just be like this. And all this method would do would be, it would just return the name of the employee. Now when I put here return, that means that I need to specify the data type of what I'm returning. Name is what I'm returning. Its data type is a string, and so I would replace void there with string. No parameters, because I don't have to do anything with any parameters. I just need to return a name. Now understand that this is a method and this is a method, and they serve 2 different purposes. This returns the name of the employee. This returns the salary for an employee. Now, you see how this is just 1 line of code in the method? At least for me, visually, I try to, if I can, try to make the code as short, as few lines as possible. So I can put all this in just 1 line of code by just hitting the backspace here. And I'm going to do this often. That's why I want to just show you this. And then I hit once again the delete. And then I do once again the delete. And I have this method in 1 line of code. And you can copy this for all the instance variables. You can write getter methods for all instance variables. Do you need to? The answer is maybe not. Maybe you don't. But it doesn't hurt to code them, and then if you need them, use them, and if you don't need them, then they're still there for you to use. And so I'll just do, I have 3 strings, I have an integer, and I have another string. And so I'll do one for each one here, int, and this is get gender, get email, get age, and then finally, the last one that we had added was the hire date, get hire date. And instead of returning name, I would return gender, I would return email, I would return age, and then I would return hire date. And I run, and notice that the return type is always compatible with the variable. Hire date is a string, age is an integer, email is a string, so on and so forth. So these are called the getter methods. And now I have 5 getter methods because there's 5 instance variables up here. There's also what we call setter methods. Setter method or a mutator method. So mutator or setter does not return the value of an instance variable. Instead, it modifies or lets you change the value of an instance variable. So let's suppose that one of your employees, like for example, my wife. When my wife married me, she changed her last name to be my last name. And so let's say that so one of your employees got married, okay? Doesn't matter, the husband or the wife, but one of them got married and then they want to change their name. And so again, because these variables are set to private, I cannot directly change their name. I can't use the constructor to change their name, because these constructors are only used when the employees are made for the very first time, and you never use the constructors ever again. What I can do is I can make a method, a public method. I'm going to put write void for now. And I can call this method I can call it set name. And in this method, I can say name equals, well, equals what, right? You want to change the name. As an example here, suppose that Brittany or Alex, it doesn't matter. Let's say Alex got married. And Alex wants to change his last name to his wife's last name. And I don't know, his wife's last name is Ortiz, right? So Alex Ortiz. Well, Alex is an employee. I could do something like, hey, after I've made Alex my employee, later down the road, I want to change that value. I would do alex.set name. So I'm executing the set name method, right, for Alex. I can also execute it for Brittany, but if I want to change only Alex's name, I can execute it for Alex. And I would send the name that I want it to change to, like that. And so what I can do then, I haven't compiled this. What I can do here is in the set name, I can make a variable, a string, and maybe call it new name. It doesn't matter what you call it. You could call it N for name. It doesn't matter. I'll put here new name because it's going to be the new name. So name for Alex is going to equal whatever new name is, with the understanding that this is a parameter. So methods have parameters. I don't need to return anything, so I don't have to do like return. I don't, because this is a setter method. All it has to do is change the name of the employee. I am going to set it to set name. Again, to save myself some space with these accessor methods and setter methods, I like to write them in just the one line of code. It's not necessary. You can leave it as they are. But for me, it just makes things a lot easier to see. And so set name, well, it requires one string. You need to send it a string, and it's basically changes name to whatever new name is. And if I compile this and I go to my employee here, I mean my target here. So I made Alex, he's an employee, his name is Alex Segura. But then later down the road, Alex wanted to change his name, so I can change only his name to Alex Ortiz. Notice that I'm not changing the gender, I'm not changing the email, age, or hire date. I just changed the name of Alex. I could also do it for Brittany if I wanted to, but I don't have to. What's true is that I have the code, I have the set name method for either of the two employees, because both of them are objects that were made using the same employee class. So you can use the set name method for either of the two. Now if I print Alex, so if I run this, I get Alex Ortiz now. When I first printed this from my first video, I had Alex Segura because I did not have this line right here. Now also, say you only are interested in, you don't want all the information for Brittany. All you want is to print Brittany's name. So you would say Brittany is an employee. Let me run the get name method, which requires no parameters. I don't need to send anything. And if I go here, I look at get name, it returns name, which is a string. And so it's going to return that to me, and I can print it. I can print it right here. So only if I only want the name, I can print it right here. I compile and I run. And now notice how I print all of the information for Alex, but for Brittany, I only print her name. Whereas before, I also would print all the information for Brittany. And so this is what methods do. Methods serve a specific functionality. Set name lets me change the name of Alex. Get name retrieves the name of Brittany. Now, yes, you think, okay, well, I already know what Brittany's name is. It's right here. But you could have, instead of calling these objects Alex and Brittany, you could have called them A and B. And then you would say, well, I want to set this employee A, I want to set its name to Alex Ortiz. And then I want to print that employee. And this employee B, somebody set her name to Brittany, and then later down the road, I forgot what's her name, so you just say employee B, I want to get her name, right? So either way works. But the objective here is to understand the purpose of methods and understand that they have different purposes. You have accessor methods that return values, specifically the instance variables, and you have mutator methods or setter methods that let you change the value of an instance variable. Again, the constructors, this code in the constructors, well, you only use one or the other. You never run both of the constructors. In this case, we ran this one. You use it at the very beginning, right here, when you create the two employees, but you don't ever use this code ever again. That's it. If you want to change something, you use the mutator methods. Or if you want to know a value of an instance variable, you use this accessor methods. Again, these are still methods. And so they carry out a specific function. Another name for a method, by the way, is a function. It's a function. Sometimes you give a function an input, and it does something with the input. Sometimes you don't give the function anything, but the function lets you retrieve a value. Now let's get back to this salary method, because this salary method is not it's not an accessor method and it's not a mutator method by definition. Okay? Instead, this is a little more complex method. The salary method is still a method, but we're going to say that it returns the salary of an employee. And so right here, instead of putting void, I'm going to return an integer, a whole number. And when I change the word void to int, I need to then immediately put here return. And for now, to save myself a headache here, because if I compile without the return statement, I'm going to get an error. I'm going to just put return 1 so that I don't compile without error, and I'm fine now. Now let's start thinking about how this is going to work. After 1 year of service, you want to add to your initial salary 2,000. After 2 years of service, you want to add to your initial salary 2,000 and 2,100. Then after 3 years, you want to add to your initial salary 2,000, 2,100, and 2,200. And so I'm thinking of a while loop, because each element here, this is the 0th element, first element, second element, third element. It has an index value associated with its location within the array. So this is at location 0. This is at location 1, location 2, location 3. And as I was talking about 3 years of service, I noticed that I need to add the element at location 0, location 1, and location 2, which happens to be just right under 3. And if I had 4 years of service, I would have to add the element at location 0, location 1, location 2, and location 3, which 3 happens to be just under 4. And so I'm going to say that while I want to make a variable that's counting, I'll call it index, is less than years of service. So that means I need to initialize index to something, and it seems to me that the most appropriate value would be 0, because this is the element at location 0, 1, 2, and 3, and so I want to start here. So while index is less than years of service, so while this value, 0, is less than, let's say, 3, I want to add to my initial salary. I want initial salary to be to equal what it starts off as. Excuse it there. Plus, I'm going to say the element from my salary schedule array at location index. And then I want to increment index by 1, otherwise I would engage in an infinite loop. And finally, I want to return initial salary, which will no longer be initial salary, it will be the current salary. So to me, this seems like it's good to go, but let's talk about it really quick. Say you're getting paid for, you start at target and you initially start making 40,000, right? 40,000. After 1 year of service, you would make 42. After 2 years of service, you would make 42 plus 2,100, which would be 44,100. After 3 years, you would make 44,100 plus 2,200, which is 46,300, and so on and so forth. I made a variable, and understand that you can make variables at any time. Don't tie your hands. You can make variables. Maybe you don't use them, but don't be afraid to make a variable. I made a variable called index, and I don't have to call it index. I could call it anything. It could be I, A, X, whatever. I initialize it at 0 because the first element I want to add is 2,000, which is at location 0. And I'm going to say that while index is less than my years of service, so if I have 3 years of service, this would be 0 less than 3, which is true. I want 40,000 to equal, that's what this says, in my initial salary, I guess I should say, I want my initial salary to equal what it is initially, which is 40,000, plus salary of 0, which happens to be 2,000. So that would be 40,000 plus 2,000. And then I want to increment index to 1, and 1 is still less than 3. And so now I'm going to add this to 42,000 plus salary schedule of 1, because index is 1, which is 2100, and so that would be 42,000 plus 2,100, and then so on and so forth, and I would return the last of the value here. So let me compile this, and let's test this. Let's say that Alex, I want to get the salary for Alex, and Alex's initial salary is 40,000, and Alex has 1 year of service, or he just had his 1 year anniversary when of his hire date, and so I would expect Alex's salary to be 42,000 because he got a $2,000 raise. Now, if I compile this and I run, I don't see anything after I print Brittany's name. Right? That's because although I executed the code in the method salary, Alex is an employee, so I can look at the employee class and look at the salary method. It returned the initial salary to me right here, and I didn't do anything with it. And so I can say something like this: int Alex's, I can't put apostrophes here, Alex salary equals, so I made a variable, or you can call it just s, whatever you want. Int s is equal to, Alex is an employee, let's get it Alex's salary, send it 4,000 and 1 year of service, and then I can print s. Like that. And now I can do the following. I can run, and now after I print Brittany's name, the next print statement prints the value of s, which is 42,000. Now let's say that Alex has worked at Target for 3 years now. And I run, and I get 46,300. Understand that this is the first argument that is sent to the salary method, which gets stored, and here's the salary method. It gets stored in this first parameter, and also this is the second argument that gets sent to the salary method, which is stored in the second parameter, years of service. So again, methods are functions. They're basically a segment of code that carries out a specific functionality. So I hope this helps a little bit with your understanding of methods. On the next lecture video, we'll keep talking about class structure and maybe having methods interact with one another.